All right, Matthew Fairburn. Usually when I hit the go live button, I like to stall a little bit and kind of let people come into this YouTube room. Not tonight. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live, St. Patrick's Day edition, March 17th, 2025. Good evening, everyone. Buffalo Sabres go into Matthew Fairburn's old stomping grounds, his neighborhood, into his backyard and beat the Boston Bruins by a 3-2 score tonight. Peyton Krebs, offensive powerhouse. Owen Power and Alex Tuck get the goals for the Buffalo Sabres tonight. UPL saw fewer than 20 shots, and he's been playing a lot of hockey. We might want to get to that tonight, but we're not really going to talk about the game. I think we should just jump right in. As everyone's hopping in here to the YouTube channel, we are sending this out to X as well. If you're watching on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, come over to YouTube. There will be people in the chat. You can mix it up with the regulars, and I see a few of them in there already. Thanks, everyone, for hopping in. Like this video when you do come over to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Sabres Prospects YouTube channel. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show audio only on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you could please leave a 5-star review. But the action is here in the live chat tonight. Matthew, let's give the live chat something to talk about. The game is the game. They come out over the weekend. They beat Vegas on home ice. Go into Boston tonight, pick up another win. They needed some extra time to get both of those victories. But the big thing here, I think that we should just kind of dive right into now is like, what's going on with this team? Are they a bunch of tough guys now? They're standing up for each other. They're defending the colors, getting Jordan Greenway back, I think has been a big part of this. But it's not just Greenway. There's other guys. What's going on with this team toughness all of a sudden? Because it seems like we've been talking about this organization needing team toughness for like a decade. And it's been sorely missed all season. And now here it comes. What are you seeing out there on the ice in the room? It's wild.
It seems to be sinking in. Whatever message Lindy Ruff has been trying to get across, whatever discussions they've been having in the room, I think this is the crux of the comment Rasmus Dahlin made on Saturday after they beat the Golden Knights in overtime, when he said they're starting to look like a real team. That I don't think was in reference to the fact necessarily that they won the game or that they're, climbing up the standings or anything like that. I think it more has to do with the way they're playing the game, the honest way they're sticking to their system, being a good teammate, sticking up for one another, team toughness, all part of it. Part of being tough too is being disciplined, staying to your system, staying to your structure, not playing selfish, not taking selfish penalties, just not doing, stupid things throughout the course of a game. And yes, of course, when the time calls, sticking up for one another, jumping in. You saw Peyton Krebs jump in for Yuri Kulik on Saturday after he took a high hit. You saw Jordan Greenway get in a fight on the next shift, I believe, the next even strength shift anyways. It was shortly after that on Saturday. And then Nikita Zadorov took a late hit at Tage Thompson against the Bruins tonight, and Greenway jumped right in again. So there's that. There's like after the whistle, you're seeing a little bit more engagement, just emotional energy from the group. And it has to last. It was an interesting comment from Lindy Ruff when I asked him about it before they left for the road trip, about how you coach that, how you teach that, because a lot of it seems like it should be organic, right? If guys care about each other, if guys want to stick up for each other. And he didn't totally answer that question, but he said, no matter what team you're on across sports, you're not all going to like each other. But when you put that sweater on, for those 3 hours, you're teammates, and you have to act like it and stick up for one another. There's certain things you need to do to be a good teammate. And I think maybe too often over the last few years, this was a collection of individuals. And I don't know that they dislike one another. I don't know, that there's anything really to that part of it, but there's a difference between liking the guys in the room and really going to battle with them. And I think that is the one thing that the last 15, 20 games, however many they have left here, can bring out. And maybe you can build a foundation. I don't really care about the record from this point forward. What they do in these games from a record standpoint is not going to help them win games in October. But coming together as a team might lay the foundation for something better in the fall. So we'll see.
Part of me thinks it's too little too late in terms of the team toughness. Obviously, where was it all season? Did it take them being like pushed around, going through the Jersey game? And that wasn't the first time that had happened all year, that they had to have a talk, and it's almost like the coaching staff had to force it out of these guys. And it doesn't change a thing. Like, just like say they play like this for the, what is it, 17 games left, which by the way, they probably have to go undefeated right now,
Yeah,
right? To get over,
there's no
like,
play.
you know what I'm saying? Yeah, there's no playoffs, but I'm just saying, like, they could still go undefeated and probably not make it. You know what I mean? But like, with that said, say they play tough and they show this every night. For me, that won't be enough. You still have to go get out and get those guys that have that natural killer instinct. And I'm not talking about these guys that are just ass kickers, but we talked about it last year coming into free agency. Get some guys that stir it up, drag the team into the fight. They still don't have enough of that naturally throughout the lineup. It's going to be a big thing that we're talking about, but it sticks out like a sore thumb. For me, it's not just Greenway and Krebs, like I was hinting when I teed it up, because that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, was just that all of a sudden. And why now? And why are they doing it now? But it's other guys, though. Like, there's one player on this team that hasn't gotten a fight that's playing bigger. Who is it? Do you know who I'm talking about? The past 4 or 5 games. I'm not putting you on the spot, but I kind of am. There's one player that comes to mind when you watch him out there. He seems to be getting juice off of this different energy in the team defending each other now. It's Beck Malenstein. Have you noticed him out there playing with, I think he's even turned the knob up a little bit more.
And Sam Lafferty, it feels like, is turning it up. And to an extent, he always kind of plays big, but he's playing a little extra that way as Zach Benson. You know, there is, I think we've talked about this on the show before. There is an actual like psychological, probably physiological thing that happens when your team plays that way. And it helps. It helps you, you know, it feeds off one another, but it also just helps you play with more energy and play the game a different way. You bring up that they need more players that are the ones dragging into the fight. I would actually, you know, I agree with that, because I would say that tonight, I think the reason the temperature got raised is because of Zadorov, right? You want to be the one raising the temperature.
They need to initiate.
Exactly. And they're doing a better job, I think, reacting, responding, and being engaged from there. Same as the Vegas game. I wouldn't say they dragged Vegas into that fight. I think Vegas dragged them into that fight, got them going, and they then, you know, I was thinking it throughout the game is, you know, when is somebody going to try to lay a hard hit on Jack Eichel, you know, and get this crowd into this game? And he's not an easy guy to hit, right? He's a really hard guy to knock off the puck, one of the strongest players in the league, you know, strong skater, really great balance, but you hear the crowd booing him, you know, the crowd is worn out, right? But they're into that game. And we were texting during that game, and I was saying, you know, somebody's got to put a hit on him. Like, I'm not saying knock his head off, but like put a hard hit on him, though. Put a hard hit on him and get the crowd going. And then we were texting, it's like, who does it, right? Like, who's the guy that does it? And you could count a couple, maybe. And I think that kind of speaks to the point that the problem you're referencing is that it's good. I think what this is good for, not that it's going to translate into October, that they're going to come out of the gate and lead the league in fighting majors. But what it's good for is weeding out the guys who aren't willing, weeding out the guys who are maybe not engaged. And you know, talk about Malenstein and Lafferty and these guys that are maybe into, you know, it's firing them up a little bit. Who are the passengers?
Mm-hmm.
Identify the passengers and start to trim this roster and bring in more drivers. And I think that's what the final 15-ish games are good for, is figuring out who's in it, who's not in it, because one thing has been made clear over the last couple of seasons, that if they're going to get out of this, it's not going to be easy. They're not going to do it the easy way. They're going to have to really be a team that grinds their way there, and they're not going to get by on their skill and their offensive ability. They need to become a team. You know, they don't have enough high-end talent to get to the playoffs on that alone. As much as this has been talked about as a highly skilled team and an offensively gifted team, they don't have Matthews, Marner, and Nylander. You know, they don't have a top line like that. So you do need to identify. It's been long enough with this core. It's been long enough with a lot of these young players that they're not that young anymore. And you need to identify who some of those passengers are and who needs to be shipped out next, because more stuff needs to happen to this roster for sure.
Yeah, I think the kind of them responding physically and not initiating still, but getting sucked in and at least doing something about it, where before they were doing nothing about it. It is good to see, but it's incredibly frustrating because it's March. And where was this when they were not winning in those 13 games, and when they were squandering all these points early in the season? It's incredibly frustrating. And by the way, even though I'm kind of giving props to Malenstein, where was he early in the year doing it? Because those are the guys that you need to maybe set the tempo. And Lafferty. So I'm not letting those guys off the hook. Yeah.
Lafferty drove the net in the Vegas game, made a great play, like got wide, used his speed, lowered his shoulder. And I thought, where has this guy been for the first 60 games of the season? Like, he's making $2 million to do that, right? We heard about his speed, his ability to hit. He's been invisible the entire year. And I think Malenstein maybe hasn't gotten a big chunk of ice time, maybe, to get into his rhythm or feel, that role. But you're big and you're physical and you can push people around, and you need to kind of do it. You can't just be like a big, nice guy who tries really hard and hits. You need to stick up for guys and use that size and physicality. So I think a big part of it, frankly, is, you mentioned that losing streak. Jordan Greenway was out for a good chunk of that, and Jordan Greenway was banged up for a good chunk of the year, not just out of the lineup, but sometimes playing hurt. I think it's encouraging that fresh off signing that contract,
still going.
He's still going, and he's like going to another level where maybe before he was caught in this in between, right? Where it was Don Granato bangs the table to trade for him, talks about all the skill he has. He's sort of in between identities of playing up in the lineup, and he's still playing up in the lineup, but I think he has settled into his role here. Not that he's a fighter, but that if he has to be, he will be. And that it seems like he might be one of the guys that, I don't know how many games in a row it's going to take for him fighting before teams stop taking liberties with guys. But Greenway seems willing to find out. And I think when he's out of the lineup, they're not quite the same team. So speaks to your point about needing more of those guys. Mm-hmm. But I think it shows, bringing back Greenway, there's a reason for it. And there's a role that he plays that will matter. And he is one of their better defensive forwards anyways, without the fighting piece. So been very encouraged by his level of play, but his level of just emotional engagement as a leader and, trying to get the guys going. So those are good things, but like you said, you need a lot more of it. You need a lot more than just a couple of guys. And there's still some guys where it's noticeably missing, and a lot of other stuff is missing from their game too. I mean, Jack Quinn, Matthias Samuelsson feel like the primary culprits of being passengers on this team too often, just from emotional engagement, production, level of play, consistency, all those things. And they're not alone. I mean, I've been waiting. I think we saw it a little bit tonight, a little bit of against Vegas, but the level of physicality from Clifton too, right? Like, more often, that's his game, third pairing defenseman. Like, that's what you need from him. So work in progress for sure, but I mean, better late than never, I guess. I mean, sure, they should have done it early in the season. They missed a lot of opportunities to do it, but if they were mailing it in right now, it would be even worse.
Yeah, you mentioned, and I think that's going to be the team identity. I want everyone to kind of remember this conversation that we're having about the toughness and the need to keep adding. And that's going to be the identity that I think they have to go out of their way to build in the offseason. So let's remember that, because we're going to have episodes where we talk about free agency, and maybe we throw out some, what I would think are ideal or realistic kind of trade concepts. And for me anyways, I've talked about it with the draft. Months ago, I was saying that I'm ready to sacrifice skill for energy, compete, motor, whatever draft jargon that we always throw out there. But that's what I'd be looking for. It's the same thing on the shopping list at the pro level in the offseason this year. And that's, you create your identity that way. They've just won 2 games in a row. I know it's not the end of the world. I see a commenter in here like, yeah, they haven't arrived because they won 2 games. No kidding. Right? Like, we're not saying that, but what we're saying is that I think that's what you got to go for moving forward. They didn't have Peterka the last 2 games. They didn't have Josh Norris, and we're going to get to him here in a minute, because the last time we were together was a trade deadline, and I think we should probably talk about that scenario. But 2 of your guys that were on your top line a couple of games ago, now they're starting to kind of, this energy, this effort. Lafferty was out there in overtime against Vegas. Crazy, right?
So is Krebs.
Krebs, yeah. Krebs is kind of, he's getting an opportunity here with those guys kind of not, and Lindy's really throwing him a bone here. And I don't know if it's going to, unlock anything, but it's got to be good for his confidence and making him feel valued here. And again, that's what makes this kind of a bummer, because I don't want to say it's entirely meaningless, but it is March. They're out of it. It's toast. And it kind of, yes, you're going to tamp it down a little bit because of this. It's not meaningless, but it doesn't feel like it has a ton of meaning. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out just because it is a change. And I think that these guys, to your point, got to start throwing these players in 2 piles here. I think these are the auditions the rest of the season. And you're seeing some good things from some guys early. And yeah, I think that you use this wisely to say who's in and who's out next year, and you start making some moves, because I think everyone knows that there's surgery required to this roster.
Somewhat significant surgery, probably.
Yep.
You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to panic, but we've done very much the opposite of that the last couple of years, right? Of doing far too little to the roster. So I almost say you can overdo it, right? Beyond some wild moves. But like, if Jack Quinn's on the table, he's on the table. Like, he's got 10 goals this year. He's 23 years old. Is it early? Yeah, but can you upgrade? Yes. Right? Matthias Samuelsson, does he have value? I don't know. I'm not really in the camp of like buy him out. I get that it's a nice savings if you do, but
yeah,
I think it's a guy that could have value. So I'm not in a rush. And I think they're playing him on that pair with Dahlin to see if they can find his game again. And they played well before. I mean, I get he's like everyone's favorite target right now. Cousins is gone, so now it's Quinn and Samuelsson.
Yeah.
It's deserved. I get it. He's not playing well this year. He's one of the number 1 offenders when it comes to not jumping in on scrums and using his size and sticking up for guys. He's more of a like, let me grab a guy and settle things down. Like, let's all have a good time type of guy.
Yeah.
But there's still something there in the player, and there's still probably value there that I'm not like buying him out. I don't love the contract. Don't get me wrong. I really don't like the contract, and the money could be important if you're trying to take a swing at a big name this summer. But
it's the only scenario. You got to commit to spending into the cap, and you got to have something really cooking that you're going to add a big number. That's the only scenario. And we got a lot of time to talk about that, 3.5 months basically to kind of talk through that. I'm not there yet either, honestly. Let's just kind of see how it plays out here the rest of the season, and just it's going to be part of this offseason strategy discussion that we'll have. But yeah, I'm not there yet. Let's talk about Norris a little bit. Comes here, what did he play? 2 games? 3 games? No, I can't even remember. It's been kind of a crazy week. He played a couple games.
He played
the one game in Florida.
3.
Yeah, and then
it was 3. Yeah, one on the road. One in Florida. Played against Edmonton. Played against Detroit and scored.
Yeah, that's right.
And then was missing from practice Friday and has not played since. So the injury appears like it's not major. The idea was that he was going to end up on the road trip and be a possibility. So something he had been dealing with, which seems like it predates the Sabres. I don't think this is a case. Again, Kevin Adams deserves a lot of criticism. A lot of it he's gotten on this show. I don't know that this is a case, from what I can gather, of negligence on the part of the Sabres, not knowing about an injury, or him having something that they didn't check out. I think it was something they probably knew about and were okay with, but or that it's just not that major, right? Whatever it is. So he could be back pretty soon. He's fit in pretty well, I think, when in those 3 games that he was healthy. Lots more to be seen, though, right? Like, this is just very early first impressions that we're getting of it.
Yeah, and it's hard for him to fit in right away. You still got to learn guys, right? Just learn their tendencies. I like that they had him up with Thompson. I think it was Thompson and Tuck that he played with, at least in that first game. It was a national team development program line. And is he really a top line centerman? We got to kind of figure that out. We need to see more of how he blends with those guys. He could be, because I always say chemistry matters, because I think he has a responsible two-way game. And if you want Tage Thompson to be a winger, he could play there. Is he an ideal top line centerman? No, I don't think so. But I like the player. We talked about it. We don't need to rehash everything that we said, because again, the last time you and I were together was trade deadline day. We talked about the maturity. They got more mature by adding him. They got a good player, manageable number, 7'9" and change, right? Just under 8. But I wanted to kind of get an idea of what you saw. The first game was tough. I think he was much better in the Edmonton game and the Detroit game for sure. The Detroit game, it would have been nice I wanted to get together with you that night. I couldn't do it. I fell asleep. I finally caught up on sleep. I wanted to sleep between the first and the second period. I ended up sleeping like the entire. I was just like, no, I'm out. So that's why
the Sabres can do that to you.
Yeah. Yeah. At least I didn't do it for 13 games in a row.
Right. Who needs Benadryl when you can just, flip on the Sabres? But I think Norris, what he brings and what I see is that there's a lot of little things in his game, his stick work when he doesn't have the puck, his, ability to win battles. He's not like crazy physical or anything like that, but he does win a lot of battles. He's in the right spot a lot of the times, making smart plays, and he's definitely more, he's a pretty good forechecker, I think, but just the hockey IQ is pretty evident to me. And I think this team lacks hockey IQ for the most part. So I think they became a smarter hockey team by acquiring him. I think he has a better hockey IQ than Dylan Cousins does. I think maybe Cousins is more talented, but hockey IQ is a skill too. And Norris has that. It showed up even in the quick 3-game sample size. So
very positional, doesn't overhandle the puck, but he can handle it, but he doesn't overhandle it. He's never struck me as a guy who really has it on his stick very long. You know what I mean? kind of moves around. But no, I wanted to pick Matthew's brain on that. I know when he steps away here real quick, when he comes back, I do want to get into some things that were in the Athletic. I think that's what a lot of people want to talk about today with the owners' rankings coming out. And I know Sabres fans showed up in droves to provide feedback in that Athletic survey on ownership and the confidence level. Athletic does pretty much a series of polls every year. But as Matthew gets back set up here, that'll be a good transition out of the Norris conversation. I want to get into, I closed up the Norris conversation. I just wanted to pick your brain on that real quick, because I think that we should get into the owner poll.
We should. Sorry, I was just grabbing some water.
No, you're fine.
My voice kind of sounds like Dylan Cousins all of a sudden. I don't know what's
you
happening.
got that vocal fry, which that always bothered me. That's the only, well, it's not the only thing, but it's like the one thing I just never liked about Dylan Cousins was that whole sounded like a chick on The Bachelorette. You know,
Yeah.
I hated that.
I don't know what's going on here. I've been on a lot of calls today, so I think my voice is just worn out here late night, but I'm like, it's trailing off on me a little bit. Like, I'm not sick or anything. So
I thought maybe you burned through a pack of unfiltered Pall Malls.
That's kind of what it sounds like I have going on here. I mean, last show I'm, all warbly and my picture's all blurry, and now I've got my setup locked in, but here I am, fighting through the voice. Luckily there's some water. There was some water close by, so maybe that'll help get me through it.
Yeah. So no, you sound much better. So whatever you did, and that's great. I'm glad you walked away, because there's times when we've done almost 60 plus of these shows that I have to go to the bathroom really bad. And sometimes I was going to bail and go off camera. You now have given me a pass to do that at some point here in the very near future. So early this morning, bright and early, the Athletic was so kind here on St. Patrick's Day, 2025, to drop their NHL owner rankings. And you knew what we were in for right away, because the title of the article is NHL Owner Rankings, grading every team from Tampa Bay to Buffalo. And I'm like, okay, is Buffalo first or 32nd? No, I'm just kidding. I think we kind of knew what that was. But yeah, I was kind of letting the fans know that I wanted to talk about this. They came out in pretty good numbers, didn't they, Matthew Fairburn, to provide some feedback on their confidence level in the current ownership situation. And I don't know, I mean, they had a couple quotes in there. Let me just scroll it up here, because they do have kind of a little scorecard for the owners. And I would encourage everyone, it's your natural reflex if you're a Sabres fan to kind of like look and scroll. Wasn't super easy to find, because you had to scroll a long way down to the bottom of this list to find the Sabres, if that's what your first look was for. And I'm still scrolling here. Here we go. Number 32, Buffalo Sabres. So Terry Pegula has been ranked dead last. Majority owner since 2011. Let's see, regular season rank 32nd, playoff rank 32nd, 0 Stanley Cups. Okay, I think we know that. Okay, the fan base evaluation. There was 4 criteria in the fan base evaluation, and he ranked 32nd in all 4. Willingness to spend, organizational stability, treatment of the fan base, franchise vision. So not a pretty picture. Now, there were some quotes from a fan perspective in there. Matthew, did you see a wider assortment of the fan perspective feedback in this poll, or did you only get to see what was published?
I have not seen it yet. I saw, I have the feedback from our specific fan survey, but Myrtle and I were going to get together at some point and compare notes on, what else was said by Sabres fans. So this is entirely driven by the fan response, how each fan base perceives their ownership group, which is, in some ways a big piece of the puzzle, right? Or some would say the only thing that matters, right, is how are you perceived by your consumers. It certainly matters to an extent how you're perceived in the building too, right? But what he's done to the hockey watching public of Buffalo is pretty evident, I think, in this survey. We've talked about it in the fan survey that we ran a few weeks ago about how low the confidence is in Pagula and Adams in particular. It's a little bit better for Ruff, not great for his assistants, which is, basically Lindy Ruff is the only one that's immune to this sort of criticism, it seems like. But Jeremy White pointed this out when he shared the story that the gap between 8 and 31 was as big as the gap between 31 and 32. And I think a lot of fan bases probably sit there and they don't maybe have a strong opinion on their ownership, right? Which is probably the position that Sabres fans wish they were in. Maybe they just didn't notice the guy or didn't, have a reason to feel the way that they do. But what timing? I know for a fact this wasn't intentional, but what timing that this came out on the morning of the early bird deadline for season ticket renewals, which
that's right. That was today at 5, wasn't it?
5 p.m. So, like I said, I didn't have any hand in, like, I have not seen the extra comments or whatever. And, this was a story Myrtle's worked on for quite a while, collecting all this feedback. But it's clear that no fan base feels as strongly about their owner as the Sabres do. It just so happens that those feelings are very strongly negative.
Yeah, additional context too. So each team was given a grade. The 30th ranked team is the Calgary Flames. So 30, third from the bottom. They were given a C. And I think the criteria is they have a fan base evaluation. There's a confidence in owner score. So basically there's a fan score and an athletic score, and then the aggregate score, right? So 30th in the league was a C. 31st, Vancouver. We kind of know what's been going on there with Aquilini. They got a D+. Terry Pagula was given an F. He got obviously a pretty negative score from the fans, and the athletic score was actually lower, right? 1.72 from the fans, 1.7 from the athletic, 1.7 overall. So not surprising. You weren't surprised by this, were you? Did you think that there was an owner in the league that was going to get feedback that would maybe place them beneath the Sabres on this list?
No. And, there's some, I guess, selection bias involved in a survey like this because, where do we have more subscribers, right? But it's still an average. Like this was something Myrtle took like months on. He sent the initial survey out, months ago. So they're trying to eliminate for stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is we have, a pretty good chunk of Buffalo subscribers, and they're a passionate bunch, right? They respond to these things. Like in my fan surveys, there's routinely over 1,000, people that take the time to like fill out the form, but even like fill out the short answer stuff. And, the comment section on Sabres articles is always very busy. And so no surprise to me that those same people, I mean, I read our comment section on stories, so I know that those people were, flooding Myrtle's survey. And I, frankly, not surprised because I know how fans feel about him, but also not surprised because of the repeated missteps that have been very public in Buffalo and nationally. This is, you just have to look at what's happened every single full season since he bought the team. You have to, anybody who's been to a game in Buffalo in the last few years and had also been to one, 15 years ago, talks about, man, this place used to be ... and a lot of damage has been done, and it's not going to be easy damage to undo by any means. I think they're in for a really interesting week, few months on the business side, because, those season ticket renewal numbers after the early bird deadline, I don't know, maybe people in the chat can tell us what what they've heard from fellow fans. Maybe there's season ticket holders in the chat that can share. I know, I've had some people reach out after I, mentioned it on the show a few weeks ago, but anecdotally, it seems like a lot of people are not going to be renewing their season tickets. I think they got a nice bump after that 22-23 season. I think a good amount of people fell off after that 23-24 season when they, didn't play very well. I think they probably kept on a decent amount just because of Lindy. But I could see that number really taking a hit this year. Pretty substantially. We'll see. And we'll see. I also wouldn't be surprised, right? They put this deadline in place, which I think frankly pissed a lot of people off, right? This renew by March 17th or your price is going to go up. A lot of people kind of took it as a threat, and I think, the letter itself did not help whatever renewals they were hoping to get. But to, kind of put this hard and fast deadline on it and then say the price will then go up when people don't know what they're paying for, frankly, right? Josh Norris instead of Dylan Cousins, but they don't know what's going to happen with Kevin Adams. They don't know if Lindy Ruff will be back for a second season. They don't know whether he'll have new assistants, who they'll add in the summer, whether they'll spend to the cap, all of these things. But maybe the Sabres need to know what kind of revenue they have coming in before they make all those decisions. I don't know, but it's just kind of bleak to think about the situation they're in on that side of things, because what do you sell? And I know what will probably happen is the deadline goes past, you get more people that are thinking about canceling, and maybe they'll still quietly offer no price hike, right? Just to keep, there'll be various tactics used to keep customers. But
they're going to have to react. Yeah, they're going to have to react. This was the first wave of trying to create some urgency to see what the what the results would be. They're going to have to keep going down this path of doing something for fans, outreach. What's funny, what was the date? And again, do you remember roughly the date of that letter? Because I know you wrote a story on it.
It was February 27th.
Do you remember roughly what the date of that letter was?
Because it was my birthday.
Okay, February 27th. Oh, that's right. Yeah, happy birthday, Matt. So the Sabres went on. They lost that night. Okay, so I was in Nashville. Okay, so they lost that night to Carolina. They lost 6 in a row. Okay. The Amherst, who got touted,
4 or 5 in a row,
lost five in a row. I think over the weekend there was only one organizational win since that letter. Meanwhile, also, by the way, there were teams around them in the league. So they put their communication out, right? Creating some urgency, trying to drum up support to get a baseline understanding of where the fans were at, take their temperature for renewals. And you saw other teams get a little creative when they were trying to cast a net for renewals, right? Well, there was the Rangers, Philly. Some of these guys did some different things, right? And got creative based on this year's results of what they were going to do with season tickets. That leads me to believe that this, like, all the more reason why, yeah, you have specifics on some of those, right?
The Rangers, I know the Rangers in particular said they will not raise prices if they don't make the playoffs, period. For current, season ticket members. So I know that the Sabres have one of the more affordable tickets in the NHL. But, I mean, there's a variety of different problems that they have right now as far as attracting fans. And number one, obviously, is that they are not a good hockey team. If they were a good hockey team, a lot of these problems go away. But I don't think the damage is going to be all that simple to undo because of some of the little things that they've done wrong from a business standpoint and from a, customer to business, relationship standpoint. I just feel like a lot of people, they don't like the messaging, they don't like the letter coming from Pete Coelho instead of Terry Pagula. They don't like what they've heard from Kevin Adams this season. They don't like hearing that the team is on the doorstep when they're in last place. They don't like hearing about massive strides on the penalty kill when the results on the penalty kill would be enough to probably get an assistant coach fired on a lot of NHL teams. Like, or hearing about Rochester when the time for pumping Rochester's tires is long since passed, right? And we've talked about there's not that many guys on Rochester, frankly, that will be helping this team next year. So it's hard to sell that type of message after, now 14 years without the playoffs. And I'm curious what it'll do to the numbers. They had, coming out of the pandemic, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 6,500 season tickets. They don't report, they don't, put these numbers out there, but you can. John Vogel used to kind of deduce it by preseason attendance because full season ticket holders buy those, automatically. And, he estimated about 6,500 coming out of the pandemic, bumped up to around 9,000, I think, the next year, hung out. I think they got another bump, maybe a couple thousand, maybe 1,500 or something after that 91-point season, but then it was back below, I think, I would guess back below 10,000 this year. And does anybody out there think it's going up after this year? I would have a hard time believing that it is on a number of fronts too, right? Like you're talking about everything that's gone on the ice, everything that's gone on, from a public relations, like tone deaf is what I hear a lot from fans. Like they feel like this is a tone deaf organization, but the on ice results have been disappointing. There's a lot of different things happening here. The Bills are opening up a new stadium that is going to be very expensive to, have a seat in. And they command, frankly, a lot of people's disposable income in the fall. You see the attendance of Sabres games in the fall and in the spring, and it's different. The tariff situation is another, interesting wrinkle of like, I don't know what percentage of the season ticket base is from Ontario, but it's not zero. And I don't know, the Canadians are getting pretty serious about not consuming American products and maybe not traveling over here as often. That's not going to necessarily help. So,
and that's worth noting, by the way, the Canadian fan base in Southern Ontario, the Sabres have always had a very concerted marketing strategy for that Southern Ontario base. It's always been very important to them. So the political climate and the tariffs I think it's a pretty big impact that we haven't always thought about. I wanted to make sure that people understood. I think that's very crucial.
Yeah, it's not just, the Canadians fans and the Leafs fans and like the single game tickets.
Oh, it's Sabres fans.
Up. It's Sabres season ticket holders is who I'm talking about.
Hamilton South.
Yeah. Good. That adds to the population of Buffalo, which is already outside of Winnipeg, I think the smallest market in the league. So, the smallest American market in the league with an arena that when I look around, I think it's too big, seats too many people because they're third from the bottom in average percentage capacity, sixth from the bottom in average attendance. So the raw number isn't as bad as the capacity number, but they can seat like 19,000. It's like a top 10 arena in the league. In terms of how big it is, I don't know whose idea that was, but that would be my number one goal in any renovation is to get rid of some seats and, replace it with, different types of things to, spruce up the aesthetic of the arena. But that's neither here nor there. Point being, to spin it back to the hockey piece of this conversation is, does that add to the urgency for some change potentially? If you feel like you've really lost some people and that, how long can you go? How long can you do that? Like, how long can you just bleed money, and not maximize, your arena and your revenue, and not to mention the amount of playoff revenue that they've missed out on for 14 years. It's there should be more urgency than there's ever been in, that building over the next, in a month, really. The season ends in a month. So it's a big month.
Yeah, it starts with the product on the ice. Sabres are not going to get out of whatever, like solve some of these issues, like with the arena and everything else, without the fans participating, showing up, buying season tickets, coming in off the street, buying games. And the Sabres have to motivate those fans to show up. Bottom line, business 101, I know. But in this market, especially, and I look forward, forward thinking with a new commissioner potentially coming in, if they're already talking about Bettman retiring, what is the long-term viability of the market, right? We don't have to get into it right now, but these are the things that I'm thinking about now. That situation's got to turn. Can't get any worse, we think. And actually, we said that last year, and it did. And they got to do it fast. So I don't know if Terry Pegula pays attention to these owner rankings to bring it back. Does he care?
I doubt he cares, but I think
honestly,
I doubt it, right? I don't know. If he did, then he would have shown it in different, I just don't, he doesn't strike me as the type that's overly consumed by the Athletics owner rankings. I could be wrong about that. I think he's definitely sensitive to how unpopular he is. I think the family, at least, is sensitive to how unpopular they are among this fan base. There's a reason you don't see him very often, and that there's, I think there's a definite sensitivity to that, but it hasn't manifested itself in action with this particular team. So will Kevin Adams get a sixth season? I think, frankly, that this is so closely related to that in a way, because I think a lot of the consumers, the only way they know how to voice their displeasure is with their wallet. And we're going to see how many of them did that in the coming weeks.
47 minutes in. If you could, please, if you haven't already, hit that like button. Everyone knows how upset I get. I'll be up all night rolling around if we don't get what I feel are the requisite amount of likes for me to have a good night of sleep. So hit that like button if you could, please, on YouTube. Again, if you're on Twitter,
I say KB needs at least 100 likes.
Easy. I need 200. Pretty soon I'm going to be getting real greedy on that. But yeah, and if you're over in Twitter, come on over. There's people in the chat. It's hopping. We're going to get to some chats here in a second. There were two things that I wanted to talk about tonight. I think we're going to leave them in the show sheet and get to them next time. But I do want to talk about Luukkonen. Big picture, but also just, the season, kind of some thoughts on where he's at. He's playing a lot. I think we should talk about him. And then also I kind of put a note in there. There's a couple things I put in here, and I think they're good topics that they'll keep us here all night if we get into them now. But I do think when we start talking about the offseason, the free agency, I want to talk about the business side. What can they do from a business perspective? I want to talk about the team building, like I mentioned. And I also want to talk about some of the marketing energy and what they can do and use some of the assets that they have locally. I think they have a really good recruiting tool. And that's a little, just kind of teaser, I guess, that they can maybe use to their advantage to do some recruiting. So we'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, hit that like button and let's get into the chat. Matthew, you want to do that? Because my strategy tonight was to not go forever. Pretty tired. Got a full day tomorrow. I'm saying that now, and we'll probably be here for another 45 minutes. Who the hell knows? But I think we should get into the chat. Were you working on anything in the chat? Were you calling anything out that you want to kick us off with?
I've been starring the chat. Quickly on Luukkonen, 50 games played, tied with Sorokin and Shesterkin. Only Hellebuck and Vasilevsky have more than 50. They're at 53 and 52. Swayman and Saros are at 49, Ottinger 48. So, he is being treated like that level of goaltender. He's not playing like it, I think, is the simplest way to say it. He's not handling that workload the same way those guys are, outside of Saros, who's having a down year, and probably Swayman too, you would say, is in that same bucket of not playing particularly well. The other guys are earning those games, right? Kind of, Hellebuck will probably win the Vezina. Vasilevsky's having a great year. He's a big part of Tampa's success. The Rangers aren't playing particularly well, but Shesterkin's having a really good year. Sorokin's playing well. Like, I don't think UPL is on that level, but it becomes especially, you saw 3 times in 5 games, I think, that he let up 5 or more goals. He had 5 against the Sharks, 6 against the Lightning, 7 against the Red Wings. So, and they just keep going to him. Reimer's not getting much run here at all. He will, because they have some back-to-backs coming up, but
yeah,
they're putting a lot on Luukkonen's shoulders, and I just don't feel like he's worn down here late in the year.
Will Reimer, or will they shuttle Levi up for a game? We always say
they
that.
Might.
They might. They might. Because I think the goaltending situation right now is fascinating. That's kind of why I wanted to mention Luukkonen. I'm glad you shared those numbers. I think people realize it because they watch the Sabres all the time, but he's playing a lot relative to the other guys that are quote unquote number 1 goaltenders in the NHL. And the results haven't been there. Goaltending situation, not only this year, but really next year. I think it's really fascinating. And I think there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, I wrote the other day that I think the Luukkonen and Levi idea that, we've talked about, like that's most likely what will end up happening. It feels risky to me, given the way Luukkonen has played this year. He hasn't been super consistent. We've never seen Levi do it at the NHL level for more than that. Really, that 7-game stretch he had when he first came up was probably his best stretch. I think he's going to be a good NHL goalie. I think he's got so much promise as a prospect, and I think eventually he will get there. I think in an ideal world, though, when he comes up, he's playing 20 to 30 games, right? And not being relied upon in the sense of, if this doesn't work, if you're not really good starter quality out of the gate, this team's in trouble. And that's what it's been, for Levi's early career in the NHL. He got sent down again this year. He got sent down, last season. There's some risk baked into that plan, because I frankly couldn't confidently tell you what they would get out of either one of those guys next year.
It's risky on both ends of that. It's risky with an inexperienced guy as a safety valve if Luukkonen doesn't pick it up. And just for everything that you just said, it's risky on the Luukkonen end of it too. So no, I think it's fascinating. I think there's a lot to discuss there. And how do they strategize around the position in the offseason? What are they going to do? I think that's really compelling, because it's not, I don't think, the given that we thought it was, that we knew what the tandem would be next year. Yeah. So
I think
more to come on that.
I think it depends too on a lot of factors, right? Like, I think Lindy Ruff probably recognizes the need for a really strong, experienced backup, or another veteran, but the free agent class isn't great. So I don't know. There's a lot of variables. Do you let Levi cook for another year in the AHL and really, show some patience? It's an interesting call. They have a lot of decisions to make there. Well, really only a couple, but big ones.
They got to guard against waivers. Don't they have to guard against waivers too at Levi next year?
They might be getting to that point, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah. So we'll talk about that. That's definitely off-season discussion, something to track down the home stretch here in this season. What do they have? 17 games left. At this rate, Luukkonen probably play 15 of them. You know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy just how much he's played this year. All right, let's kick it off in the chat, Matthew. I'll let you fire away.
I've got to clear out.
Pick a winner.
I had a few. It looks like that we're hanging out from last time. I never unstarred.
All right.
How about this one from Neil? Does Kozak beat out Krebs as a fourth line center in October? This brings up just sort of an interesting discussion that I wanted to kick over to you because you've watched these guys a lot more. But of these Amerks that have been getting called up, Kozak, Murray, Rosane, like who do you think is realistic as a potential, on the 23-man roster next season for the Sabres?
Probably Kozak for the role that he plays. Brett Murray, to me, is not a guy that is on an NHL opening night roster, largely just because of the skating. He's a guy that you can be, foot soldier when you need him. He can plug minutes. Rosane's interesting. I think for the role again, but I've thought about this a lot with Kozak too. Like, is he like a truly legitimate fourth line guy in the NHL next season? It's going to come down to what they do in the offseason. It's going to come down to how they shop and how they keep building all those things that we talked about at the top of the episode tonight with getting some experienced bodies and toughness, getting the average age a little, don't be the youngest team in the NHL. But I think for the role, Kozak probably has the best opportunity of those guys that we've seen. And to your earlier comment about Rochester, I don't see a lot of guys that are down there that are really going to push for any time next year, with the exception of Ryan Johnson. Ryan Johnson will probably carve out some kind of role, I think, on opening night. But again, how are they going to shop? And just get more experience wherever they can, all over the roster. Because we talk about this every year. We get to the end of the year and we're ready to just hand jobs to guys. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like what the question leads us to try to do again. And I'm not all the way there yet, but I think the best opportunity would reside with Kozak because of the role. You agree?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And the way he's played probably warrants a look. What will be interesting, whether it's Lindy Ruff, another coach, assuming it's Lindy Ruff, have no reason to think otherwise, but there will be a full training camp, whereas last year they kind of had to pick their team and go to Prague. Like, there might be a chance for some guys to legitimately earn spots. Maybe some, veterans come in on PTOs or something. Who knows? Make training camp a little bit more competitive for everybody, frankly.
The Rosane part of that discussion is interesting. And I know the comment from Neil Kennington was about Kozak and Krebs. Like, I haven't really answered that question. Krebs, I know he's getting a little love here in the past couple of games. It may very well be very short-lived. And Krebs is a guy that could get a change of scenery. Because as the energy that he brings and everything else, and it's great to see, he's still not knocking guys over. He's still not, you know what I mean? He's playing with that infectious attitude that you want the guys to have. But at the end of the day, I need a little more. And actually, I get a little more from Kozak right now.
That was the big thing Krebs
honestly,
talked
in terms of the role. Yeah.
At locker cleanout last year, he talked about getting stronger so that when he gets hit, he can knock guys over. He doesn't get knocked off the puck as easily. And we haven't seen it. He still brings a lot of energy. Some of the skill is coming out a little bit these last couple of games, which is nice to see, but still kind of a tweener, right? Not big and strong enough to be overly physical, even though he has the energy for it. Not probably skilled enough to be a major point producer, even though he probably has the brain for it and, kind of the creativity for it. So he's kind of caught in the middle. And I don't know I know some people would maybe blame that on development, or it's possible, right, that more time in Rochester would have helped him. But I just look at the player and I see, like, that's who I see as a player. And I don't know, maybe there's development. Maybe there's development in there, but maybe this is just who he is, right? And he's gotten to the point now in his career where expecting another level up from here is not necessarily realistic.
He just turned 24 a couple months ago, 280 games into his NHL career. I think by now, I think maybe a year ago or a little bit deeper, back, I would have said, it's situational. Like when he was getting opportunities up the lineup and he wasn't making the most of them, you could say, yeah, he just doesn't have the experience, or, he needs more time. I think he's kind of run out of that here in this situation. And that's what's unfortunate. So even for the Neil Kennington question, again, I spent way too long on this question. It's probably still Kozak. With a question mark as if is he like an ideal guy next year for the Buffalo Sabres too?
It's a good question. Brian Stable. I don't know the exact pronunciation.
Brian Stabell.
All right. I'm sure the heroic run to pick 8 or 9 will solve their talent issue. I mean, it's the ever-present dilemma this time of year, right? I think I don't think they're going to get all the way to pick 8 or 9, but we'll see. I think they'll hang out in the top 5. It is pretty tight from 4 to 8, though. So I think the top 3 are pretty much comfortably locked in, right? Last time I looked at the standings, it's like hard to imagine them being one of those bottom 3 teams. But I mean, well, not that hard to imagine because it's the Sabres. Actually, no, the bottom 3 is not totally locked in because they're right there with the Predators right now. They're only 2 points up, same amount of games played. But the bottom 2 is absolutely locked in. The Kraken, the Flyers, and the Ducks are all somewhat within striking distance for the Sabres, maybe even the Penguins. So
Penguins have already played 69 games. So
and only have 66 points. So they're 6 points ahead of the Sabres. I mean, that from a points percentage standpoint, there's not a whole lot separating them in that regard. So things can get weird quick. We'll see how it works. See how it works out. You're certainly right. The lower they pick, it's not going to help their odds. They could use a top 5 pick, but I think we also know that this team can't really be mailing it in either. They're not going to get a lot out of that.
Years ago, I used to think that a good finish, because they've always been like a young team, it just seems, and it's like when they're a young team, it's like, oh, you want to see them have some success at the end of the season, but they don't. To your earlier comment, they never parlay that into something of a good start the following season. But at the same time, I don't care if they pick 8th or 5th or 4th. I don't care. They're going to get a good player. I know that doesn't mesh with what the fans want. You always, at this point in the year, want a better player. Well, the teams also picked 1st and 2nd in some of these drafts, and guess what? They're still last in the Eastern Conference.
Well, and look, maybe
so who
if
gives
you're
a
not
shit
picking
where they pick,
maybe if you're not picking top 5, you feel a little more comfortable trading it and getting a real NHL player, right?
Maybe.
I think if you're picking top 5, you're feeling a little tempted to take the blue chip, big time prospect, and maybe if you're picking a few picks lower, you're like, actually, you know what? Let's package this bad boy and let somebody else get the Hellenius Benson level player that you've already drafted a couple of in the last couple of years and go get a real NHL, ready player. But either way, like you said, that's not going to make or break them. But I do know that that's something that people are probably watching. And, I'm interested to see, kind of, this is an interesting one from Grumpy Scott, that this team is not close, which, I mean, they're in last place, right? So as he notes, they would have been a bottom 5 team last year too if UPL didn't overachieve. They're not close. They're not like Blackhawks level far away either, right? They could at any point figure this out with. I think the reason they feel so far away for a lot of people is because of Kevin Adams, because it's hard to imagine the guy who's had 5 seasons to figuring it out in his 6th season. And I get that for sure. But I think if you had like a legitimate, overhaul in the front office and, some clear eyes come in to make some moves and fix this, and you spent to the cap, maybe you're not that far off. But it's a good point by Grumpy Scott between UPL overachieving and the way they played defensively, and just the way they played down the stretch last season, sort of keeping their head above water. There was never the horrible losing streak like you saw this year. They just sort of hung around all year. I think Don Granato, in a way, I mean, it certainly wasn't a great coaching job. That he lost his job and they underachieved. But seeing this season, you're seeing it could have been a lot worse last year.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the stuff you're seeing this year, maybe it's necessary for Lindy to get through to these guys, but a lot of the stuff you're seeing this year with not sticking up for one another, and kind of the questioning of the team toughness, like there's just a lot off the ice, it seems like, that didn't exist with that last Granato team. But I guess you had your own version of it last year with the captain having 1 foot out the door all year and not saluting the fans and whatever else. They had their own versions of it, but in some ways getting that team to 84 points or whatever they did was kind of an overachieving as we're seeing this year based on their results.
I'm going to go back to Grumpy Scott. And I do want to get a different mix of chatters too. I want to spread it out. I realize I start a couple of like the same people's chats too. Grumpy Scott, follow up with him. He said Adams has been talking about adding toughness for years now. If he's still the GM, I'll believe it when I see it. Most perplexing thing about his tenure has been the overemphasis on skill, and it cannot continue. Cannot continue. I'm trading skill. And you started to see it a little bit. He got it this year. It just didn't connect with the fourth line build. Obey-Kubel did not work out. Giving up a second-round pick for Malenstein. I think that shows a commitment to trying to get that type of player. But that was just the first little ripple of a wave that needs to happen, in my opinion, organizationally. I can't say it enough. So, no, I agree, Grumpy Scott, wholeheartedly with your comment there. David Dietz. Oh, sorry. Let me just continue real quick because we already talked a little bit about this. But David Dietz, friend of the show, they need a goalie. UPL is not it. Matthew opined quite a bit on UPL. I think that maybe with the right goaltending partner, you still have something there with UPL. He's just playing too much, and he's also in this really weird situation. I think there's a lot of players that would benefit from the culture changing on this team. And it could be, the goaltender could also be part of that. So I just have an opinion there. Like, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater with UPL by any means. But he's got to be better for sure. And I think they need to manage his workload a little bit better, get him some help. Go ahead, man. Sorry.
David Dietz, I was actually going to throw him up also because he pointed out they did just lose 6 in a row. So it's not like they're totally destroying their draft position. They're also working on that part of their game at the same time. Which is a good point.
I want the fans to have fun, like following the draft. And like, I think it'd be cool for you to like cover a high pick, or at the draft and stuff like that. But like, I'm just like, whatever. Like somebody like Buchik Ross put a tweet out tonight talking about like the Bruins are tanking, something like that. And I see people were like sending it to people at GR, and I'm like, don't even go there and like try to say that like what the Bruins are doing is a tank, like what the Sabres did. Teams do this all the time at the trade deadline and rebuild and sell off expiring contracts and assets. The Sabres tanked in like October.
2 years
Not the
in
same.
a row.
I know what the people are. Yeah, don't even go there. Don't even go there. Don't even go there. Like trying to rationalize it almost. Like, see, Sabres should be doing the same thing. Tank and Buffalo, 2 words I don't ever want to hear ever again. Go ahead.
Let's see who else we have here.
I'm going to throw one up because we talked a little bit about Krebs and strength on the puck. I'll go to Captain Ahab. Looking at the body language and the facial expressions of Quinn, he reminds me of a high school student looking out the window while the class is in session. He looks uninterested. There was a shot of Quinn tonight on the bench. I don't think that he looks disinterested. I think that he just still looks boyish, young, brought up too fast.
Which is Not in and of itself a problem, because I think some of the great players in the league look boyish in some ways, right? Like, at
Yeah.
certain, like Connor Bedard looks pretty boyish. I mean, one of one type of player, but like Jack Hughes, for a while, like, so I don't discredit, just based on eye test, but watching him play the game, he's not strong on the puck. He's not strong, on his stick, and he's just at this point, kind of just a pure shooter who doesn't seem to have a lot of confidence in his shot either. He's not getting to the areas of the ice that he used to get to, and there's not a lot of confidence there. And yeah, I would put him in the passenger category at the moment.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. So Ahab, like, even though I said like I didn't in that point in time, that shot of him on the bench, I was saying he didn't look disinterested there, but I do know what you mean with
oh,
his
I
body language
100%, I
overall.
100% am
Yeah,
in
I
that.
get. Yeah, so I wasn't trying to discredit what he said about that. I was referencing because it was like something I took away from the game tonight was that shot. I made the mistake of petting my dog 5 minutes ago, and now she won't leave me alone. I think she finally got the picture, but if I look disinterested in what you were saying, that's why, Matthew.
Yeah, he is. Quinn is right firmly on that list for me of guys that you have to see what's out there for him this summer, just to change your mix, because he's getting too much important ice time and has for a couple of years. You want to talk about not a couple of years ago, the strategy was don't sign veterans because they're going to block the opportunity for these developing players. Now you need to get rid of these guys who are blocking opportunity for you to go and upgrade your roster and get real quality veterans that can help. Jason Zucker-esque type, you need room in your lineup for those guys. And right now they have 9 forwards under contract. Quinn being an RFA, I think puts his future, up in the air.
2 assists tonight. And by the way, the Quinn thing too, that's going to be a fun one. What are the chances they just like qualify him?
Right. I mean, he's got
like
10
we'll get into
year,
that
so.
too. Yeah. We'll get into that also but it's ironic that we're asking that question. Like, what are they going to really do here? Because coming into the season, we were talking about a much different number. Our friends at AFP Analytics, we're talking about a much different number. Now, do I think that Kevin Adams is going to just qualify him with that minimal bump? Probably not. Because I don't think he did that with Krebs. Right?
No,
Didn't
he
he
gave
give
him a
Krebs a
little
little bit more
bit
than his
more than
QO?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's like there's precedent there, but that's going to be an interesting one. I think that's going to be an exciting conversation that we're going to have about Jack Quinn's next contract. Steven Cantor, tequila lover, man of the slopes. This is kind of an interesting hard shift. Sounds like JJ. This is what Cantor writes. Sounds like JJ Peterka is out and is a passenger per Frank Saravalli. Now, is Cantor speaking about just the trade deadline smoke?
I think
Or
so.
is there something else that I may have missed?
Haven't seen a lot new in that regard, but I think that was the general
We don't need to
vibe
go.
people
Yeah.
took from because Saravalli was the one that was out in front of Peterka, teams being interested in him and all that. I think you have to wonder about Peterka, Byram, Tuck, all these guys that have a fair amount of leverage and decisions to make about their future. Now, Peterka doesn't have a ton of leverage because he's an RFA. So there's only so much he can do. But he does have a little bit because of how he's played, right? And same goes for Byram as an RFA, more so for Tuck, who goes into the final season of his contract before becoming an unrestricted free agent. These guys have talent to impact other teams, and that gives them leverage if they choose to really exercise it. And you have to, one of the things Kevin Adams mentioned in his answer about when I asked about JJ Peterka after the deadline, and I was just asking sort of generally because we saw his name in rumors, he denied that he was interested in trading him or whatever, that he was having any conversations about trading him. But he also said he needs to convince, or he needs to talk to JJ about how he's going to make this team better. that was like a small part of the answer that he snuck in there, but it told me that, you know, I don't know that he's totally out, but he's among those, I'm sure, not alone, guys that are frustrated, right? And wondering where this team is heading. And we're an hour 15 in. I don't think we've gotten on here since the Darlene, did he, didn't he request a trade type of thing, or threaten to request a trade. But the general takeaway from all of this is like, there are guys that want answers, right? About which direction this team is heading. And it ties into the same conversation we were having when we're talking about the business stuff. It's like, is that enough to put the screws on Kevin Adams a little bit? If you have fans saying, don't call me until you shuffle up the deck in the front office. If you have players wondering about the direction, the team is heading, it depends on if the players are willing to. I don't think the players really have that direct line to ownership that maybe Eichel had, right? So it's probably not. It probably doesn't get to that point where they would force anything. But if you start to get to a situation where you have guys, the whole thing was guys who want to be in Buffalo. Well, if some of your most talented players don't want to be in Buffalo anymore, then that becomes your homegrown players. Then your strategy kind of starts going out the window, and you have to question the guy running said strategy.
I don't want to go too deep on my take on Peterka. Now, you and I have spoken privately off the show, and you kind of know how I feel about Peterka. What I would share tonight, what I'm comfortable sharing tonight, is that I think he is the most compelling name that you and I are going to talk about this offseason. Because I just think there's matches to be made potentially to look at. And I know the fans don't want to really move a player like that. He's always like this guy that comes up as an untouchable. But I think there's more to it with him. And I just think that we're going to talk about Peterka a lot this offseason when it comes to team building. Remember some of the things that I was saying earlier about like kind of what I'm looking for in building and weaving into the fabric of this team, and where does he fit into that? I see it from both sides. You know what I mean? But he's not an untouchable for me. I will say that. He's not at that Darlene level.
No, because when you
really,
want to change
it.
up the mix, when you want to change up the mix, you have to consider trading guys that actually have value. And Peterka does. So if you want to find another,
we can talk about Quinn, we can talk about Samuelson all day. You want to move the needle? All right. Well, let's go.
I mean, that would move the needle even more than Cousins did, I think. So on the open market, given his age.
I threw a couple names at you. Oh, dude, I mean, he would be there's a lot of we'll talk about it. I don't want to go there right now because I mean we'll be here until 2:00 a.m. with all the scenarios I have for him. The dream ones, the real ones, there's different levels of scenarios that you could talk about with him in terms of contract length too, by the way. So it's not all, oh, here goes Baker, wants to ship up Turkey. No, it's not all that. There's every scenario that I want to talk about, which I think makes sense for the Sabres. People are like, what's he talking about? Come back next week or maybe the week after. Tom Telfer. This is a name I recognize from the past as an Amerks fan, I believe. He says, as much as I enjoy watching Levi with the Amerks, this team cannot make the same mistake again and assume UPL and Levi will be the tandem. Kind of a follow-up to that, Anthony S. says UPL's contract length is an issue. He is at best a middling starter, and his contract probably means he's on the roster for a minimum of a couple more seasons. I see where Tom Telfer is going in terms of the tandem next season. That's what he's referring to. I agree. I want to talk about that a little bit. But also, to Anthony's point, I'm not so sure on the contract length. Depending on, again, I think the goaltending is a fascinating discussion. I think Peterka is fascinating. I think the goaltending is fascinating. The goaltending one, we weren't sure it was going to be an issue that we were going to be discussing at the end of the season. Now it's kind of reared its ugly head again. UPL is another guy. I'm not looking to move him right now, but I'm not sitting there saying, oh, just because you have him signed that he's guaranteed to be here either. I think that you could be open for business. He's one of those guys you could potentially be open for business.
He's movable at that number for sure, I think.
Yep. Cap's going
Uh,
up. He's got experience.
going
Another
up.
guy that you could take out of Buffalo, and he might do well.
100%. People would look at the way they've played defense. They would look at the way he finished at the end of last year. Definitely movable. But again, maybe if you play better defense, you get a better version of UPL, right? So there's that to be considered as well for both of these goalies, but definitely a good off-season topic to discuss what they do in net.
And just for funsies on the goaltending topic, Brian Cummings, we haven't thrown a Cummings chat up in a little bit here. Brian Cummings says he's out of sight, out of mind right now, but keep this name in the back of your mind. Laurent Brossoit. I could get him for future considerations, and if healthy, he's a credible 1B. I think he's one of a few, and I know where you're going with that, Cummings. I don't hate you throwing that into the chat now here on March. Now, what is now March 18th? I should probably take off this shamrock thing that I have on, quarter zip. But no, I agree, Cummings. I think there's a couple other names like that, but I get where you're going, and it kind of played into what Matthew was saying, so I wanted to throw it up. Good thought. And I see some goaltending prospect names in the chat. Just real quick on that, Topias Laininen playing well. I was on, I think it was yesterday, Sunday morning, just kind of rehashing a thought that I've shared here that I do think you look to get him over. Ratzlaff is coming in. He is got his season really on track. 40 saves last night. He's been awesome his past dozen starts. Save percentage over 95 in his last dozen starts. They are pretty close. I think they're probably one game away from locking up the final playoff spot. Seattle Thunderbirds did make the playoffs last year. You want Ratzlaff to have some playoff experience this year, and he'll be tested. But here's the thing. They're going to be the last seed if they make it and they lock it up in the Western Conference. They're going to play a kick-ass team, and he's got his game going right now. So it's like he's a guy that's like setting up where he could maybe possibly steal a series for all we know. And by the way, Ryerson Leanders, goaltender of the month in the OHL back in February, playing great since January 1. He's a little bit further off, goes back to college next year, or goes back to the OHL next year. But it's kind of turned around. The goaltending ranks have turned around. And with all these guys, you just want to get them on a development plan. Just because they're going to get Ratzlaff and potentially Laininen to North America next year and in the system, no guarantees on these guys. Just get them into a controlled environment, get them working with Seamus Kotick, the goaltending development coach, get them on a development plan, and give them some room to breathe. They're not going to be coming in a little more polished like Levi was, and even Levi still shown that he required some developmental time. So just wanted to give those goaltending prospects a plug while we are talking about the position, because they're not the answer to the Luukkonen thing, the Levi thing. That's kind of where I was going with that. And yes, Rickus, underrated trade deadline acquisition. Eric Brandstrom scored in his first game. Did he have 2 goals in his first game for Rochester? He's been playing really well. And that's a great addition to the Amerks. So kind of an underrated, we spent so much time talking about Yoki, how are you going bye-bye and bringing Norris in and Cousins. We didn't really talk much about Brandstrom. But that Rochester defense team, defensive group down there, pretty fun. Rathbone's been excellent, playing with Johnson all year. Novikov, really good with Metza. Now you throw Brandstrom into the mix. Komarov's developing. They got some pretty fun shit going on down there on the farm. Got anything else, Start?
I got nothing. We're an hour 23.
I got nothing. All right.
I've burned through my stars here. That was all of them. A good chat tonight, though. We had a pretty good crowd in, considering.
We did have a good chat. I don't feel like we gave the chat their full due. Well, I don't think we gave them their due. Like, here's David Dietz. I think he's talking about the team, but he could be talking about us. He said they're so unlikable. He could be talking about us.
He could be talking about us. He could be talking about his fellow chatters. I don't know.
Mike Lipinski. I'm just going to go speed round here real quick. Jeez. You can read that one. I'm not reading that one.
David Dietz says, I got nothing. Kevin Adams biography. David Dietz, I think, gets chatter of the night here. He's been up there a few times.
Dietz a good egg, man. I know Dietz. I've known David Dietz since probably 2004-ish. 2004-ish. 2005, 2004. Mike Lipinski. I've looked at this name. I thought about it. It costs a lot of money. Noah Dobson would be a great fit, but huge money in D already. He's also lefty, I believe.
He's righty. I think he's righty.
That's gonna.
Isn't he?
Is he ready? Is he ready? Okay, I thought he's lefty.
Yeah, he's
I
righty.
could be wrong on that. Is he righty? Okay, so
Mhm.
yeah, that's right. He's righty, but he's got a profile. He's actually been grittier lately. Like the past couple of times I've watched Dobson, I think he's really changed the way that he looks. He was always kind of offensive minded, but yeah, he's a great fit. He's big money though. You got to move something out on the blue line what you already have. That's right. He is a righty. Now I think I knew that. Shit. But interesting name. But like, what's his number though? Isn't he like 9? No, not 9. He's 8, right? Something like that. He's pretty high. I'm talking like I'm pretty high because now I'm just making stuff up.
He's in the last year of his deal. He's an RFA.
I thought he had well, he's gonna cost. What's AFP? Maybe that's where I'm getting that number from.
Yeah, he'll probably.
Do you have AFP up?
I do not, but he'll probably cost pretty penny.
I did look at him though because we've started already kind of looking. We're trying to stay ahead of free agency, and like the right-handed pool is like it's never super super deep. You know what I mean? But I think it's a trade that if you're going to get a real solid righty in here, it's not going to be a free agent acquisition. I don't think.
5.
Yeah.
On AFP, 10-5 on an 8-year deal.
Yeah.
That's
a big ass number.
That is a large.
That's a big ass number. You are buying out Matthias Samuelsson if you do that.
Yeah, and probably trading.
You know what I mean? And yeah, exactly. And probably trading Josh Norris. Which, by the way, might be something we talk about.
I mean,
all right.
Who knows?
Apparently I'm having
you had some,
Coda says the production crew.
You were blurry a few times. Your audio's been fine, but like you've definitely gotten a little blurry, and there's times where like I can tell you're not hearing my answer like in real time, maybe like a second delay. So tonight, I think I get the gold star. I raised my level of game after the threats from the chat last time, and now it's Coda taking you to the carpet.
Well, you know what the deal is actually. So in the conversation, I was going through and I was opening up windows and I was researching things and looking for things, and I think that's sucking bandwidth, and I think it's screwing me up here. That is a problem. I had too many damn windows open. Am I great now? Am I nice and...
No, not really.
All right, eat shit. All right. Well, I think we're good then. We're an hour and a half in anyways. Last call in the chat. Anything else? I'm scrolling. I think we're good. I don't feel like we gave the chat their due tonight. We'll be better with the chat next time. I did want this to be a quick show tonight, but like I said, here we are, an hour and a half in. Every time I need to be in bed, every time I say it's going to be a quick show, it's not a quick show.
Yeah, we gave the chat plenty of love. I mean, we couldn't have gotten to an hour and a half without the chat, so I think the chat got their due.
All right, Brian Cummings says, you guys are always blurry, maybe because I can't talk the Sabres sober. I feel you, Cummings. I feel you. Any updates on JBD? JBD.
Yeah.
On the ice, healthy scratch. We're going to see him soon. Okay. Matthew, do a quick plug and I'll take us out of here.
Yeah, you can find me at theathletic.com/Sabres. That's where I'm usually hanging out. You can find me on social media if that's your thing, but I'd prefer you go to The Athletic and come here to the YouTube channel and subscribe to the show. 5 stars. Hit the like button so Kris isn't cranky. He's already going to be cranky because he's up late. He's probably going to text me in the morning about, his lousy meeting he's having at work. And He's going to be very
I'll just
cranky.
cancel. I'm
So,
just going to
but
cancel.
he'll be in a good mood if he's got 200 likes to wake up to.
Boom. Canceling meetings right now in my Outlook app. Boom. All right. That's Matthew Fairburn. Thanks for your plugs. Athletic.com Sabres. You can find him there for the production crew, who apparently I'm going to have to go out and whoop their ass with a coat hanger for having me blurry tonight. Thanks, everyone, for hopping in. You guys are the best. You make the show what it is. We're going to be back again very soon. No 10-day break next time, Matthew. Let's get together much sooner. All right. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.